I don't prefer entrepreneurs who go out and raise millions of dollars. Millions of dollars corrupts how you think and how you execute. So when you have too much of something, you don't know the value of it. You should think about doing things globally, or you should act locally. So if you're an Indian entrepreneur, you have to think about making your best customer your first customer. But what people do is they will try to make their first customer the fastest customer. When you think about whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a turnaround guy or you're VC, right? There's no such thing as the right time to do the right thing. There's no such thing. Right time,
Right now.
right now, always the right thing.
All we have is now. Welcome to an episode by Pace Wisdom, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories and insights from successful entrepreneurs and unsung heroes. Each week, we delve into the journeys of business leaders and innovators, uncovering the challenges they overcome and the lessons they have learned. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply seeking motivation, an episode offers valuable perspectives to fuel your ambitions. I'm Bharath Jatangi, and today we have PV Boccasam, or the fondly called Prashant V. Boccasam. PV, welcome to an episode by Pace Wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, PV. It's a pleasure to have you here. Guys, I would also like to take pleasure introducing PV. Fondly called PV Boccasam is a seasoned entrepreneur, investor, and executive with a rich background in enterprise software and venture capital. He began his career at Microsoft in the early 1990s, contributing to projects like Windows and Exchange. In 1997, he founded Entevo Corporation, a leader in enterprise directory management, which was later acquired by BindView, or the so-called Symantec now. He continued his entrepreneurial journey by founding Aprova in 2002, a governance, risk, and compliance company acquired by Infor, and Clear Standards in 2007, a carbon management firm which was being acquired later by SAP. In the venture capital arena, PV served as a general partner at Novak Biddle Venture Partners, managing a $600 million early stage fund focused on enterprise software investments. He joined Kota Capital in 2021 as a partner on the investment team. PV also played a pivotal roles in various companies, including serving on the board of directors and compensation committee of Appian Corporation. Beyond his personal endeavors, which even I would love to know more in this podcast, is PV is an active in philanthropy, particularly in early childhood education, mentorship, and rural entrepreneurship. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering from the University of Pune in India. Now, PV serves as a chairman and managing partner at Yon Capital. Today's focus is on a conversation on personal evolution, ambitious entrepreneurship, technology trends, and how India's youth are shaping the future. PV, welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bharath.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure that I'm talking to you because we met in Kyoto back in Japan, and I never thought that I will be doing a podcast with you, and I'm all happy and grateful to you, PV. Thanks again for making it. PV, I just want to get into a couple of questions which have been bonkering about me, and I've prepared and worked upon these questions to understand that the right audience, the aspiring entrepreneurships, the aspiring Gen Z budding entrepreneurs would love to hear out from you, because you have walked the road ahead. You have been there and you have seen different transitions and phases of life. You have seen different highs of the markets. There are many other things you have witnessed. So we just want to touch upon them and understand your perspective, your message. Probably this can actually decode a lot to many youngsters like us, where we'll be happy to proceed further much faster.
Mhm.
So that's the whole focus. With your permission, can I start with the first question?
Sure. Let's go. Let's begin.
Yeah, thank you. So, PV, the question what I'm trying to see is more on the early influences, cultural roots, career beginnings, something on that sort. Like growing up and studying in India, what early experiences or values shaped your approach to business and technology?
Like we were discussing earlier, right? I come from a very kind of traditional South Indian, Brahmin, Hindu, scripture-driven family. So the goal was to obviously be educated, right, as much as possible. On both sides of my family, there are either engineers, doctors, or professors, right? And so, my dad's engineer, my mom's a teacher, and my great grandfather on my dad's side worked for Sir MV, and
Interesting.
so he was the first batch at what is now called UVCE here in Bangalore. This was probably in the 1800s.
Okay.
Right. I think he graduated in 1904 or something like that. On my dad's side, on my mom's side, he was a lawyer.
Okay.
Right. He was the right-hand man for the freedom fighters. Like Patel and so on. So the idea that education can fuel you, right, into wherever you want to be, that's ingrained in the Indian society, right? As you know, everywhere you go, every specific sort of corner, you'll find a coaching class, IIT, this, or get a upskilling here. So there's not a single gate or a billboard you're going to miss, right? So education is very ingrained in our society. So that's obviously not new. But what is different, though, is how you operate under constraints, right? So the idea that you could provide constraints, right, as a key ingredient for growth is quite unnatural to Western societies. And this idea of frugality, right, is very unique to India and China, right, and other places, right, where resources are not readily available, right? If I imagine my own sort of growing up, right, of let's say playing cricket on the streets, today there are probably people who come with their own kit. When we were growing up, one guy bought the bat, other kid bought the ball, one guy bought one stump, other guy bought the other stump, guy got the middle stump, other guy got the bails.
And you played in the road.
Right? You played on the road, right? And if the wicket keeper didn't show up, the wall behind you was a wicket keeper.
Yeah, even I remember doing that too.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, the idea of you owning an entire cricket set or entire cricket bat didn't exist, right? And I could only afford a ball, right? And that was maybe like one ball, and then after the leather strip, then you put it inside a tennis ball and you play with tennis cricket and so on, right? And the other kid probably just had a bat, right? What it does is, and thinking back, right? One of the things you think about is like, what does that teach you? One is, actually it teaches you tremendous amount of respect in having accountability. If the guy with the bat doesn't show up on time, you can't start the game. If the 3 stumps are not there, yes, you could work with 2 stumps, right? But you never know if the middle stump, took off if you're a face bowler, right? That teamwork and collaboration of respecting people, right? Where if the guy didn't bring your guard, there was going to be a problem.
True.
So it forces people to say, hey, show up on time, collaborate, own something, doesn't matter what it is, right? And those were great times, right? And you really didn't care about what type of bat it was or whatever. You had one, maybe 2 bats on each of the runner's side, and you would play, right? Because we were more concerned about the technique.
True.
We were more concerned about being specific and intentional about the game you played. The same thing applies to entrepreneurship as well. So I don't prefer entrepreneurs who go out and raise millions of dollars. Millions of dollars corrupts how you think and how you execute. So when you have too much of something, you don't know the value of it.
True.
And that is what you learn, right, from growing up in India, is this idea of frugal innovation and the ability to use constraints as a key ingredient for growth. And I can't go without saying, perhaps in my first 5 minutes, this is what DeepSeek today has taught us.
Absolutely. That's a very valid example. The world was awestruck by what has happened.
Not because they had more stuff, it's because they didn't have stuff.
They didn't have
It's because they did not have access to the latest chips, because they didn't have access to that kind of money.
Well agreed. Well agreed.
Right? So now an entire nation is panicking because now what was considered a backward nation 30 years ago, right,
Is much
now
ahead.
is a forefront
Much ahead.
of AI, perhaps. Now it has its sets of issues as well. Now the question is, what does it mean for India, right? And we should talk about what does it mean for India, because we do have frugal innovation, but you can't take that too far. The
True.
nuance is that if you take frugal innovation too far, you don't think too big.
Well agreed.
Because the good aspects about it, but there are also downsides to it.
True.
And the reason is, again, cultural. There's only one Vidyarthi Bhavan. Okay? You go there, right, at 11:30, you will not get your favorite dosa because he's done with it. Okay? That's a different type of a model where you're focused on longevity and sustainability, right, of a business that won't scale. Right? You can only have one Vidyarthi Bhavan, right, with the same lovely masala dosa that they give you. But if he finishes with my favorite, which is sagu dosa, that ends. You come 5 minutes late, it doesn't matter how much wealth you have or who you want to pay, you're not getting your favorite dosa. Okay?
True.
That level of contentment is good for certain aspects, right, of life, but doesn't apply for entrepreneurs that want to take things at a global scale.
So you mean to say that these values, what we imbibe in the Indian culture, the frugality to all these things, also influence us a lot from our roots to the global entrepreneurship metrics?
They not only influence you, right, in fundamental ways, you have to always you should have two conflicting thoughts in your mind at all times.
Okay.
And they should fight. That's why I have a concept we talked about earlier called, you have to be politely confrontational in your mind. And a good example of it is, you should think about doing things globally, or you should act locally.
Yep. Think global, act local. We
Right.
all have been following it.
But there's a nuance to it. The nuance is, when you start day zero,
Mhm.
okay, you shouldn't think about selling the local kirana store or selling it to a local company. You should think about, what would it take a Microsoft or a General Motors or a Cisco, right, to be my first customer?
The value what you're trying to bring in there.
Because if you sell to a Fortune 1, or Fortune 2 company, the requirements that they're going to have is going to be vastly different, right, than a company here locally. So if you're an Indian entrepreneur, you have to think about making your best customer your first customer.
Well agreed.
But what people do is they will try to make their first customer the fastest customer,
Lot of difference.
which greatly minimizes their opportunity. There's an opportunity cost. Again, there's a counterpoint to it. The counterpoint to it is, if you make Walmart, which is the world's largest customer, your first customer, or JP Morgan Chase, the world's largest bank, your first customer, there's a price you have to pay for it, which is, you as a startup founder are going to be a slave to that customer, because they're going to make unrealistic demands on this little startup that you're going to pour your heart and soul into it for perhaps very little money or sometimes no money. And then sometimes, if you don't deliver, they will chew you and spit you out, and you will have nothing to show for it.
That's so interesting to articulate this view of PB. I think these metrics will actually add a lot up to the entrepreneurship, and these experiences and values do count a lot in the global markets. Uh, Thank you. Thanks for this insight. I think that was very deep thought to pounce on an entrepreneurial journey. So my question is this: your journey began at Microsoft in the early 90s. What lessons or memorable moments from that time still guide you today?
One is that friction is good,
Friction is good. Interesting. Okay.
because friction causes forward movement, right? Otherwise, you're going to be operating in free space. There's nothing that's happening. What friction does, it provides heat, light, and sound.
Okay. Correct.
So again, I go back to this concept of how do you be politely confrontational, right? With yourself, with your colleagues, and with others. And what Microsoft taught me, right, was that it was an incredibly, I'd say, aggressive and assertive culture. It taught you one and only one thing, which was how do you ship products? So there was this thing called the Ship It Award, right? That one of the presidents had established, and the idea was you only make money when you ship products, right? Now, which is very different, I think, from an India-based sort of companies, right, where people are used to getting up and asking the customers what they want, right? The Infosys, traditional BPO companies, right? What they were focused on saying, hey, give us a problem, right? And we'll find the most creative solution for you, right? They didn't get up in the morning and think about what problem do I want to solve for, okay? In the US, right, especially, in a very innovative driven sort of economy, the focus is a lot around what is the customer problem and can I articulate the problem in a way that manifests itself in a particular solution, right? So when the first chip came out, right, the Altair, in a recent book written by Microsoft, right, they knew that the software was going to drive that. They were innovative enough, right, as two young sort of entrepreneurs, to realize that the microprocessor was going to be a massive change. Realizing their vision at that time was having a computer on every desk. And that was Microsoft's vision. But if you look at the largest company at that time, right, was a company called DEC, or Digital Equipment Corp. When he was asked, hey, there's this young entrepreneur says he's going to have a computer on every desk, he laughed and he said, the world wouldn't need more than 3 computers. Because in his mind, right, the idea was, why would you have these small PCs sitting on people's desk when you could have one giant computer? Now, fast forward to today, that's what cloud is. Right?
Yeah, true.
So again, you keep two conflicting things in mind. It's not that he was wrong, right? Except that it was in a different time period and context where he's thinking in terms of mainframes,
Yeah.
right? And people logging on and doing time sharing,
Yeah.
and taking slices of compute, storage, memory, running, complex operations like processing your paycheck or, underwriting your risk insurance for you to get a life insurance policy or auto policy is the same thing today that's happening, in high processing in a cloud. The context is very different. So the evolution that you see that happened from mainframe to the PCs, the client server, right, to distributed systems, to now distributed systems in the cloud, I have seen all these evolutions happen because they all conflict with each other at that particular point in time.
Well, that makes you say friction is good.
Yes, because Microsoft was the only place where they had 4 operating system teams competing with each other.
That's amazing.
You had MS-DOS that was making the money. Windows at that time was sucked wind until Windows 3.1 and Windows 95 came about. Those two were beginning to make cash that supported Windows NT. And because Windows NT was so burdened with all the backward compatibility issues, because that is what Steve Ballmer said. Even though you want to build a brand new operating system, you still wanted that Kirana store in some rural village who had an old Tally running on DOS to run on Windows. So the architectural compromises you had to do as a software engineer to support a 8-bit, 16-bit DOS application on a 32-bit, 64-bit operating system on a computer require you to make a lot of trade-offs. Yet at the same time, that to make investments, and the company said, no, we want to build a brand new 64-bit only operating system, which someone may or may not buy.
So
Right?
this created a friction within the Microsoft itself.
Yes.
So that's how, and you're able to come out with flying colors, and that's how you're saying friction is good.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Because very few companies can actually create that level of investments. Right?
Understood.
So that's what I learned a lot from Microsoft, is that when you have resources, you don't put all the resources in one. You actually figure out a way to put competing people and let them compete. And people would say, are you mad? Why are you making these people do it? But the reality was, let the best operating system win.
That's an amazing insight, right? Friction is good. I've never thought about it, but I think that's a good learning curve for us. We would definitely take this story from Microsoft. Very observative insight, PV. I think we'll move to the next question. Taking from where friction is good, I think we should move next to see how this segment flows. Can you actually share us a personal anecdote that from your formative years that sparked your entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah. So look, when I left Microsoft, right? When I joined Microsoft, there were about 3,000 people. When I left Microsoft, there were 30,000 people.
Wow.
Right.
10x.
Yeah. Well, more than that, but the idea, right, is that when you see that level of growth, there is a sense of confidence, right, that you get, that you have been able to see the type of growth. It gives you a unique sense of confidence. But with that also comes arrogance.
Is the gift.
Right? So there's this interplay.
Okay.
Right? And there's a fine line, right, between confidence and arrogance.
True.
Right? And it's very easy to cross that.
Subconsciously,
Microsoft
maybe.
had crossed that line.
Microsoft crossed it.
Right? Because we were doing so well that we stopped listening to customers.
Yeah, because you're the market leaders.
Exactly. And we believed in having 90+% market share.
Wow.
Right? So the way you would think about it is, what percentage of market should we allow the competitor to have?
Oh, you dictated the competitor to actually take the percentage of the market share.
We would say how much we should allow them.
Allow them. Wow.
It's a different way of thinking.
Absolutely.
Right? Not how much market share should we want.
It's the other way
That's
around.
not the wrong. That may not be the right question, right? Because at that stage, right, when you start thinking about in terms of growth, right? I still remember slides that Steve Ballmer, he would put up in these large. We'd gotten so large that we used to do our annual meetings, right, at the Seattle Dome. When they would put up charts, each group would put up charts as a multiple of different companies. They will say, we want to grow 2 times WordPerfect and 3 times WordStar, 2 times Novell, 3 times Sun, 4 times IBM, 3 times. Now, for Indian entrepreneurs, right, who are listening to this, they should take note that there were people who were thinking in terms of multiples of companies, not multiples of revenue. So if you're DeepSeek or whatever the equivalent here in India is, if you aren't saying, hey, I need to think 2 times OpenAI plus 3 times DeepSeek plus 4 times Google Gemini, you're not even going to be in the game.
True.
Right? So the idea of thinking big is ingrained, right, and should be ingrained in this. Now, for India, it should not be unique. Why? Because we have 1.4 billion people. We know what it takes to scale. We know that 30 million people, right, or 300 million people, or maybe more, go to Kumbh Mela to go take a dip. Nothing like that of scale comes to mind in the US.
Absolutely.
So the way we should be reframing it is, hey, 3 times the population of the United States takes a dip in a river in India, right? Suddenly it's okay. So if I am a hospitality entrepreneur, right, or I am an entrepreneur that wants to do an ecotourism or religious tourism or whatever the niche market you want to do, you should be thinking in that scale. Not some tour operator that's saying, oh, let me take 1,000 people. No. You should be thinking in terms of, okay, what would it take to lead 20 million people, right, to a dip someplace? That level of scale of thinking applies regardless of what you do. And that's inherent to the Indian psyche.
That's a very powerful anecdote, PV. I think, the story from the Microsoft thinking on allowing the market share, dictating the market share rather that how much should the other company have, and you dictating a 90% market share and taking that view is very powerful.
Now, again, the conflicting viewpoint is that if you take that too far, there's a thing called the FTC that says, hey, we're going to look into your anti-competitive practices, okay? Now, that happened to IBM in the 70s. It happened to Microsoft in the 90s. It happened to the most of the 2000s to Google. Now it's happening to Meta. It's soon going to happen to OpenAI. This process is going to repeat itself because there is a line you don't cross, right? Because when, let's say, Apple becomes a monopoly and you start to create features, functions, and other types of barriers to continue to make more and more money from the ecosystem, then at some point it will start to erode, right, the very thing that got you there.
Is it very evident or is it extremely complex to understand the FTC for any company at that juncture?
Not really, because I think what you want to do, right, is to say, what is the fair thing to do? I'll give you a very simple example, okay? Most people here, I think, in India are Samsung users.
Yep.
Right? If you're an iPhone user, right, sending text and images to a Samsung is not easy on the text. You have to use WhatsApp.
It's a workaround.
Right? It's annoying. Now, can they come up with a very simple thing that says, yes, if I want to share a photo with my dad who's a Samsung user, and I'm an iPhone user, can I make it easier for him? He's 88 years old, and he's not going to learn something new, right? Or vice versa, whatever that might be. FTC had to get involved. It says, can you not come up with a simple standard protocol for exchanging text messages? And it's called SMS, it's called Simple Messaging Services. Make it simple. No, they don't want to do that. So FTC has to come in and put your foot down when you should have done the right thing anyway, which is make it compatible, right? Have the same standard for images, have the same standard for video, have the same standard for your EV plugs, right? So what was brilliant about certain aspects, right, of early Microsoft was what? Was we were very good in targeting developers, right? The reason why it started to go down, so our focus shifted from developers to doing something else. We started chasing mobile, we started doing this, we started doing that. Now look at what the core is, right? They come back to the core. Why is Satya took a company that went from 300 billion to 3 trillion? Because he went back to core of what Microsoft did, which is focusing on what they did best, just coddling, right, the developer community, giving them the tools, giving them the big embrace, right, to create and value, right, around now cloud and obviously Azure and their AI infrastructure. Same is true for other companies as well.
Very interesting to articulate and put across these stories. Very interesting anecdote that influences people, and it's truly a great experience for somebody to carry this memory all along and see to that, learning is so powerful. I think, thank you for sharing this as well. I would like to move on more deeper to the segment and coming to the questions part of it. With your permission, I would like to ask you a next question.
Sure, go ahead.
Now, there is a benchmark where everybody would want to start something on their own because that has got a strong influence. It has got a lot of thought process, and you see that you can justify that segment, disrupt an arena, and bring some value into the space out of your experience, all of these things. And that's how you normally, fundamentally, you go and start a startup or an organization normally, because you know that you can justify it, you know that you have an edge, you know that you can actually make some differences. Okay. Now, connected to that question, what inspired you to launch companies like Endeavo, Approva, and Clear Standards? Was there a spark or a turning point?
Yeah, look, I mean, everything has to have a genesis that is rooted in a core customer problem. Look, I think in each one of these cases, right, inspiration of the idea actually has to come from the customer and a customer pain point. You can't start with the technology. In the Intimo case, it was actually a very, very simple thing. It was this idea that people are going to move from a desktop-driven environment, okay, to a client-server environment. And for enterprises that were rapidly adopting a client-server technology, there wasn't an easy way to migrate from one platform to another platform. So if you want to upgrade from Windows 95 to Windows NT, or you had Sun servers at that time, Sun Microsystems or Novell or IBM servers, or Unix servers to Windows NT servers, right? Or from old email systems to Microsoft Exchange server, there were no tools to go do that. While Microsoft was focused around building these large systems like Exchange and Active Directory and so on, thought came to how are people going to adopt this? So we came up with very simple migration tools. We move you from point A to point B. And started with a spark that basically asks a simple question. It said, wait a minute, if you could go to your email and reset your own password, why is that same thing not available in the enterprise? Why do I have to call IT help desk and say, can you please reset my password? It didn't make any sense. So first app was a simple self-service password reset tool. And we got $400,000 from Procter & Gamble.
Okay.
I came back and I told my co-founder, hey, we sold a $400,000 deal. For what? He said, well, we showed him all the stuff and they said, no, they like that password reset tool. I said, are you serious? Yeah, that's what we sold. And then we said, oh my God. Then the concept came around and says, people want to manage identities within the enterprise. And we then began to build an entire category, which is now called identity and access management, which still exists today. So we were the pioneers of what is called IDAM in the late 90s. In Approva, it was right after the crash. So I was convinced that this crash happened, right? At that time, people don't recall now, but I think looks like we're headed in the same direction. There was a famous company called Enron. And Enron had a spectacular failure. And it turned out there was no governance around financial statements and financial reporting. Okay. And people could, report services revenue as software revenue and software revenue as services. And auditors were all confused because it was all complex systems. So I said, what if there's a system that provided compliance and governance around financial reporting? This was pre-Sarbanes-Oxley, it was pre-GLB. And so we came up with this concept of governance, risk, and compliance as a software system that you could deploy in SAP and Oracle and PeopleSoft and other systems, where it would monitor for all types of financial transactions and make sure that when you reported it, the CFO and the CEO could sign off on it using our software.
Wow.
Right? So the insight was, how do you prevent the CEO, right, of a large company or the CFO to not go to jail? The other one company was more about, carbon management. I saw another company, the wealth management space. So each one has a genesis obsessed around a customer problem. The technology came after. So what I would urge people who are watching this is that the product market fit only applies in very, very small niches. Okay? And it should actually be called market product fit, firstly, if you want to go down the analogy, because you have to first understand what the market is and then build a product for it, not the other way around.
True.
But I have a brand new thing, and people who are watching this can go look at my blog on LinkedIn called the Value Innovation Framework.
Yep.
Which is actually based on the complete opposite. You start with value first, then price, then figure out which market's going to bear, and then build the product, and then iterate around customer.
It was a very interesting blog. I've read that, and brilliant. I mean, that's a different perspective. All it gives to thinking, at all new level. Much appreciated the blog. Very insightful response you've given. But this ponders me a new question. See, you're coming from a very large enterprise. You transitioning into the shoes of entrepreneurship. Now we're talking about these 3 startups which you gave a brief about, and this transition is going to be very daunting. And I'm sure there are multiple challenges you face. Now you spoke about the value in which you are actually trying to create and the genesis behind these startups. Now my emphasis in the question is, how daunting was it, and what are the kind of challenges you faced?
Look, like we talked about, right? There's confidence, there's arrogance,
Yeah.
and the good cousin of arrogance is ignorance.
Okay. Yeah.
When you're young and you're starting a company, you don't think about all the daunting issues. You just get started.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
You don't see a wall.
Yeah. You just,
right?
Yeah.
You only see what ladders or whose shoulder I can, climb on to get over that wall, right? You don't see walls, right? You only see windows.
True.
So ignorance is a bliss many times for entrepreneurs. So they should actually not worry about, if they're passionate about a certain problem that they've identified that is of value, they shouldn't care whether it is OpenAI building it, or DeepSeek building it, or Tesla building it, or Reliance building it, or Tata's building it, because they're not. Because your unique insight as an entrepreneur comes from your belief. And I'll give you an example that's a non-tech example, okay? My wife and I, right, wanted to make sure that our daughter grows up bilingual, because for us in India, it's very common to speak 3, 4, 5 languages.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
How many languages do you speak?
Around 6.
6.
Yes.
Okay. And that is not too uncommon.
Yeah.
Right?
It is not.
Tamil pesula, Kannada matadbodu, Hindi aata hai.
Yes.
Right? We know all this because we are ingrained as the ability to be multilingual. Now, the thought of an English-only language model doesn't make any sense. Correct?
Correct.
So, if you were building a large language model, you would think in multimodal, multi-language, not just text, right? You think text and video,
true,
right? And images. So, India has a very unique way of leveraging all of its assets,
yes,
right?
Yes.
In ways that are very different to growing up in the US. So, if this episode is targeting Indian entrepreneurs, right? What I'd encourage them to kind of think about is not only think big, right? Don't worry about what is happening with others. Only concern yourself with, are you going to create value for the subsector of the customers that you want to go do, and be just great at it in every possible way, not just from a technology point. Because you can innovate on a business model. You could innovate, right, using customer service. You could innovate using, let's say, open source technologies. You could innovate, obviously, with core IP. So the idea that there's only one way to do something, right, is not true. So our focus, right, now that I'm on the other side of the fence, right, as an investor and as an entrepreneur, having sat on both sides of the table, I have the unique advantage of balancing, right, the thought process. Because as an entrepreneur, it becomes your life, right? This is the only thing you're working on, it's the only problem you're trying to solve, and it's make or break, and you live or die. But if you're a venture, I will bet on 9 horses.
Correct.
I only need one of those 9 horses to win.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So as your entrepreneur, you only have one horse, right? And one jockey. I can bet on 9 jockeys, 9 horses. If I don't like the jockey, I'll replace the jockey.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? Having been in both of those worlds, both of them have their inherent advantage, okay, and disadvantage. So the question is, can you think like this?
I mean, to my question of transitioning, I think you said ignorance is bliss. I will agree with you because I have seen in my own entrepreneurial journey, ignorance is bliss. And we all, right at my board, when all 6 co-founders sit and think that, why did we take this decision? We are successful today, or rather on the mark of being successful. I would rather put it across. We think that, we ignored many things, which was definitely bliss. This also marks me to end this question, adding to response the famous quote of Steve Jobs: stay hungry, stay foolish. I think I've been hearing this context in many responses. I hear this also from you in the form of ignorance is bliss. So thank you for the response. I think that was very insightful. Thanks for this. I would love to move on to my other segment questions, so which I'm sure our audience would be very eager enough in understanding things. Having served in turnaround roles on various boards, which leadership qualities have proven most critical during challenging periods for you? Because you have been on the segment of entrepreneurs, you've also been on the segment of investors. What was that challenging?
Turnarounds are usually when companies hit a revenue wall, right? Like a $15 and $20 million wall, and they're trying to get from 20 million to, let's say, 50 million. It turns out, right, 0 to 1 is one wall, 1 to 5 is another wall, 5 to 10 is another wall, 10 to 20 is another wall. What worked from going from 1 to 5 is not going to work to go from 5 to 20. There are different mile sets, right?
What got you here won't get you there.
Yes, right? So at each stage, you have to know what to keep and what to throw. Learning what to keep and what to kill becomes a strategic superpower that you have to build. And it's extremely easy to get distracted. And especially if you're an entrepreneur, everything looks like a challenge, everything seems important, and everything needs to be done right now.
Correct.
And that is usually a bad sign. And if you're not ruthlessly focused and prioritized, and you understand that some fires have to burn, if you are focused on putting out every fire that's happening within your company, it will consume you, and you will be the pyromaniac in your company. So the trick for entrepreneurs, right, and operators who are doing turnaround companies, or entrepreneurs who got into a situation where they have to turn around a company because they've hit a wall, you have to realize that you cannot be all things to all people. You're going to sub-optimize your value proposition, which is why I was giving you that example earlier on, right, about Vidyarthi Bhavan, right? He does not care about people who eat chole bhatures. Okay, you can go there. So the discipline Vidyarthi Bhavan has is that he will never have chole bhature on his menu.
Yep.
And he will live for another 100 years. God bless his soul. Okay? That is the same discipline that is required, right, for entrepreneurs, with a slightly different mindset that if you want to scale the company, right, what you learn from doing, let's say masala dosas, right, you want to get to the next level, what you did for masala dosa is not going to work. So if you do a turnaround, the ability for you, right, this is why services company can never become software product companies, and software product companies don't know how to be good services companies.
Bang on.
And the reason is that if you're a services company, which I know you are, when I advise services companies, I think of helping services companies in terms of how they could productize their service, right? So this is why in today's world, especially in SaaS, right, new SaaS, I call services as software, not software as services. And services as software means that you're still going to leave behind software for the company, but they still are a recurring customer for you to keep offering value-added services, which is perfect for the new world of AI. Because what is AI? AI is not a one-time thing. It's test and learn, test and learn, test and learn, and then train, and then reinforce, and then reason. Test and train, reinforce, train, fine-tune, reason, go back. right? It's a perfect model for services companies to productize what their offerings are. But the big sort of OPD companies or other types, they're now caught with their heavy feet because they cannot shift their mindset from going from productizing their services to what they've done before, which is commoditizing price with people. On the flip side, you think of product companies, if they don't figure out a way to say, hey, I want to do a release every 3 months, every 6 months, and customers are going to be happy, they're going to fail too. They got to figure out a way to do this, if not on an hourly basis, at least on a daily basis, to do updates to their customers' infrastructure. Gone are the days where you do a product launch every 3 months, or every 6 months, or every 8 months, every 9 months. No. Right? There's no reason why a software company cannot allow their consumer to discover one new feature a day. There's no reason not to. Right? So how you evolve your internal structures, how you involve the culture of the team is the single most important fact of redefining how you think about building your teams, structure, and culture. And that is one of the most important things that you could start to think about strategically. And in those challenging times, if you don't figure out, people say, you know what, after this launch is over, we'll make that change. No, right? It is only at the time of crisis should you make the most dominant change. It's counterintuitive. When something is burning at its peak, you have to change it. It turns out, you know where this is true for us?
Where do you think?
Human physique. That gent will only stop smoking after he gets a heart attack. He will only change his lifestyle after something. It's not that he didn't know that smoking is bad or not working out is bad. It's only at the time of crisis.
Yep.
And if he or she survives, they'll say, oh, you know what, we should change how we live. Wait a minute, you didn't know that before?
It's a more of a reactive approach.
So that doesn't work, right? When you think about whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a turnaround guy or you're VC, right? There's no such thing as the right time to do the right thing. There's no such thing. Right time,
Right now.
right now, always the right thing.
All we have is now.
All we have is now is what you have there, right?
Yes.
And that is the most important, learning is to be decisive. And here again, I'm going to give you a politely confrontational view, okay? Which is this idea of maintaining an extremely strong belief, but very loosely held. Because you should go with a strong viewpoint, but you should be willing to change if you get new data.
Absolutely.
But if you don't have any viewpoint, and every time someone is discussing and say, ye bhi acha, this is also good, that's also right, what is your viewpoint? So today you'll do this, tomorrow you'll do that, after tomorrow you'll do that, this customer said that, this customer said this. Next thing you know, you'll have 9 varieties. So most entrepreneurship dies because of indigestion, not out of starvation.
That's a well.
So it is a counterintuitive thought, again, which is very relevant to the Indian entrepreneur, which is we understand, we see starvation here. We see poverty here on the streets, right? You don't typically see that in the US, although we do see a lot of homeless now in the US. But you don't see poverty unless you go to really large rural areas, right? So we understand what it means to have constraints, right? We understand what the dichotomy is. So you must have very, very strong points of views, very loosely held.
I mean, yes, this is a very deep-rooted conversation, what you're trying to mention. I see how strongly and focused you walk the road ahead in the whole segment when you are trying to take up the roles on both ends, at the shoes of an entrepreneur, on the shoes of an investor, and also on shoes of being a mentor or an advisor or being on the board of many things. I clearly hear you out. I think that's a good key for people to take? Because many of them think that why can't like an example you said, why can't a services company become a product company and product company can't do services? It's a very mature thinking to understand that services has a different ball game and different DNA altogether from that of a product company, and you just can't mix both of it, or you can't be equally successful in both, at least in today's world.
Right.
And that's all through different genesis. Hearing you out, absolutely. This puts me into the next question, PV. So, how do you keep your ambition alive after setbacks? And what personal habits or philosophies you have helped you sustain your drive?
There's no such thing as a setback.
Okay.
Okay. Doesn't mean that I'm a blind optimist. You have to be a positive skeptic. If you're a jaundiced, everything is going to look yellow.
Yep.
If you're an optimist, everything looks pink and rosy. What you have to ask is a very simple question as a framework. If someone comes and says something, it could be a bad news, it could be good news, it could be horrible news. I would ask two things. Is it a one-time thing or is it a permanent thing? And you deal with it separately. If it's a one-time thing, like, you lost a customer, right? Or, you lost a colleague, or, it could be as fatal as that, right? Or, you had a failed product launch, right? Whatever it might be. The key question to ask, right, is what is the next most important step I have to take now? That is the only thing that is relevant. Not what happened before, okay? Not what happened. What is the next best course of action? That's it, right? Because if you start to brood on that setback, you're just wasting all energy. The minutes are, oh, did that guy do it? Why didn't he do it? Those are all post-mortem activities. So if you want to be a positive skeptic, what you have to do is, you have to do a pre-mortem. You have to assume that it's already dead. So if you're doing a product launch, or you're trying to get, Reliance or, JP Morgan as a customer, you have to say, I've lost JP Morgan Chase as a customer. The question you should be asking is, what are the 10 things that I did to make that customer go away? You just look at the 10, don't do those 10 things. You see what I'm saying? So the idea is inversion. So assume something has happened. So the concept of inversion is very powerful in investing, is very powerful for entrepreneurs. It's very powerful in decision-making framework. So invert the problem. So asking how things can be successful is the wrong question. Ask the reverse. What are 5 things that can go wrong? And solve for those 5 things. It will naturally be successful.
Yep.
So think about setbacks as a pre-mortem activity.
True.
Hopefully that's useful.
Yep, it is indeed. It is. Will agree with your thoughts on this. You have answered to what my question was. Enterprise software has evolved dramatically over the past few decades. Which trends in technology excite you the most right now? And in your experience, how is emerging tech like AI, blockchain, digital transformation are reshaping industries?
Yeah, again, I go back to the value creation part, right? Just like today, if you're not cloud-based, you don't have mobile, you're not optimized for end-user experience, you don't have some level of AI enablement, you're not going to be in an industry or a company that survives, right? So all these are table stakes. So I don't like to talk about technology for technology's sake. All technologies at some point are relevant, but it's always in the context of the business problem that's being solved. Yeah, all the technologies that you mentioned, whether it's AI or blockchain or whatever, it only has to be in the context of a business use case.
Correct.
Right? Otherwise, they're not very meaningful. Now, AI definitely is fundamental. And, as Mr. Modi said, I was listening to a speech at the recent French summit, and, he had a very good line that says, AI is writing the code for humanity. And the way I interpret that is, I don't think he meant code as in source code. I think what I think he means is that code for humanity means as a way to govern how we see ethics, how we see principles, how we see our mode of operation change dramatically, right? For the betterment of humanity. Because if I use AI to give you a loan and deny him a loan, it's a problem. If I can't explain, why did I deny his loan? Right? And you multiply that at the scale at which AI operates, there are probably millions of loans today that are being denied to the wrong people and money being given to people who already have it because they know how to game the system.
True.
Right?
Yep.
So you don't want to create inequities in the system. And AI is a perfect mirror of humanity that it reflects our belief systems. It reflects our biases, reflects our beliefs. This is why India should take the leadership role, if not a co-leadership role, and try to shape where AI and blockchain and all other technology you talked about to go forward, because everything will be, without India, only 80% right. Because we're 20% of the world's population. So if you're doing, using AI for healthcare, and you don't have enough data about Indians in the system, it'll only be 80% right.
With you. Yep.
So you gotta make sure that whatever that pool of data is in which you're training it includes enough of the genetic structures or data around the Indian continent subset so that we can find together cures for humanity on cancer or whatever it is, right? So would I prefer that we use technology to cure cancer before we colonize Mars? Of course. Should we do both? Perhaps.
Perhaps. Yes.
But which is more relevant, right? Losing my mother to breast cancer or getting my brother to Mars? I mean, it's not even a question I want to ask. So technology has to be used for a human purpose that delivers some way to reshape humanity.
Taken. I think we'll agree with what your response is. Very straight view to this question, PB. I mean, what are your predictions for the next big breakthrough in the enterprise tech? Now, we have seen different phases of transition happening through emerging tech to AI to all of these places right now. Where do you see the next breakthrough on the enterprise tech is going to come? And what are those insights that technology can be harnessed for environmental social good? Where do you see this breakthrough coming up?
Look, I don't like to make predictions.
Okay.
Because I think it's foolhardy. I think we can expect, and we should expect the following. The cost of compute is going to go dramatically to zero.
Okay.
Almost zero. Cost of storage, same thing, right? Cost of memory, same thing, right? Hopefully cost of energy, same thing, right? Access to power, same thing, right? Different sources of power. So we should, right, as a macro viewpoint, expect more the cost go down, more the usage of it as well, right? It's called the Jevons paradox, as you know.
Yep.
So we should expect that. But again, to be politely confrontational, right, the opposite of it is true as well, which is as energy demands go up, the less sustainable we are. As more and more algorithms, consume, more and more data, right? Data privacy is going to be, it's going to be harder and harder to kind of maintain, right? What that means to individuals, right? And how individuals can potentially monetize it and so on. So what I would predict is fundamental changes all the time.
And periodicals.
And sometimes they are so small, unnoticeable, you'll only see it after there's a rupture. And sometimes they're so sudden, right, that you've seen something all along, but you never expected that to happen so suddenly.
True.
Right? So both are true, right? And our job as, industry leaders and as entrepreneurs is to have the ear to the ground, right? an eye to the future, to always balance the two. Because what you're hearing on the ground is not what you're seeing. And what you're seeing
Is not
is
what you're
not what you're not what you're hearing. So you need both
in sync.
to regulate what you have to do next, not what you want to do in the future.
True. Next step.
Right? As your employees are coming in now, right? They should only be focused on what do I have to do next, not what happened yesterday, not what's going to happen tomorrow. What do I have to do to give my best right now?
Well, okay.
Right? I think that's what we should focus on.
Definitely. Now, this ponders me a question, right? Now that I was asking you to predict, now I would like to ask you something that what is that message you would want to give to a Gen Z entrepreneurs or like the budding startups coming up? See, entrepreneurship and different facets have different fundamental challenges to start with. Let's say somebody coming out of college and starting a startup lacks experience. Okay, or rather, they're confident about the idea or focusing like ignorance is bliss, like what you're trying to say. But an entrepreneur who is coming after 15, 20 years of a corporate experience or a large enterprise experience has different set of challenges. Okay, because he has got set to a lifestyle and he has to start all through again from the first. And he's unpredictable. What's going to happen? He's going to take a bet. Now, how serious the idea is going to be? Many other things factor a lot. Gen Z startups are something which are actually popping out pretty evidently in hundreds of numbers, month by month, and thousands by year on year across different geographies. Now, what would you like to give them a piece of advice, okay, for the Gen Z startups where the thinking is very different from times from our side? Okay, the thinking is much different for a Gen Z today, and the accessible resources to them are also in plethora. Okay, what is a message that you would want to give it to them?
Yeah, firstly, again, like I don't make productions. I don't like giving advice, especially free advice.
Okay.
Because it's worth exactly that, zero.
Okay.
So my advice to entrepreneurs, right, is that most advice is ill-advised.
Why do you think that?
Because we chatted about this earlier, there's no context. I don't know where they're coming from, right? So I don't know the contextual basis for their question, and I'm not even sure that they're asking the right question or they're framing the question in the right way. So my job as a mentor, now I can speak to you as a mentor, as an advisor, is can we help frame the question the right way?
Okay, let's understand that Gen Z is actually
right
coming to you with a clear context and an objective in where you need to mentor upon. So I know it's a very vast arena. I can't zero down on something.
No, that's fine. What I'm giving you a general framework and principle, right? The principle is that how do you know that you're asking the right question?
Okay.
How do you know this to be true? What are the three things that could make this false? Right? So if they ask these questions, they don't need anyone. So our job is to give them a framework to ask questions like this. Am I asking the right question? Is the contextual nature of this question true? How do I know that to be true? What would make this belief I have false? So then you can decide, I made the wrong assumption, right? Because you can test all your assumptions, right? So all they have to say is, what assumption have I made as an entrepreneur to make this belief to be true? So if you're not able to question yourself, then you're just being intellectually lazy, right? So I'm not saying that there's no value for mentors or advisors or whatever, because that's what we do. But you should not come looking for answers.
Okay.
And if you're looking for an answer, then either the advisor is wrong or you should not be an entrepreneur.
Okay. Now, a small question adding to this is, if there are companies where you would like to mentor, what is the metrics that you would see into them that you feel that, hey, this is a services company or this is a product company or this is a data engineering company that I would like to mentor, or this is an interesting product I would like to mentor. What is the metrics that you see normally?
I think, again, it goes back to human values.
Human values.
Right.
Okay.
So I'd like to help people, I think, who genuinely want to win for the right reasons. I don't care whether they're running a preschool like my wife is, running a nonprofit to build old age homes in rural village, or someone that's trying to solve a hard social problem, like a common friend is doing today. That is more important to me,
Great. Great.
right?
Yeah.
So it's you want to work with people that are trying to solve large, big, hairy, intractable problems. And the more audacious that goal is, right, the more exciting it is to solve that problem.
Amazing. One last question before I move to the rapid fire round. Uh, in your all startups until clear standards or much later than that, you're coming from a very tech centric approach and a leadership approach coming there. Was it because this some of them have been services also in where you've been key on, and some very interesting products. The crux of the engine there is sales. Okay, was it very challenging for you to make it a black swan entity? Was sales a barrier, or how could you make that as a black swan entity, which is an outlier?
I don't know if this question again is valid, right? The reason, Bharath, is that sales is a friction-driven process. I tell almost everybody who's in sales, wants to be in sales, or sales only begins when he says no. Sales does not begin when they say yes. After he says yes, it's only giving. The idea that sales is hard doesn't make any sense to me. Because the default position is no, I will not buy from you. So you have to convince the person, right, as to why it should be a yes, not the other way around. So, oh, they really liked my product, it was a great demo, blah, 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 blah. Well, they're only agreeing because there's no friction. So when you go for salespeople, what I tell people is challenge some basic assumption of your prospect that you fundamentally disagree with, which is your value proposition. And the customer still doesn't buy, then he or she is not the right target for you, because the very assumption on which you built the product, they don't agree. And the sales process should be, oh my God, I did not see that. Right? In that simple example, if the person on the other side doesn't believe that users should be able to reset their own passwords, you can say anything you want. So, no, I need a help desk. I'm going to have 40 people in the back who's going to return full. He's going to call, she's going to call. I will reset the password for them. That is how we want to operate. You're trying to convince them, no. Free them up so people can reset their own passwords. That itself is a revolutionary concept, right? I'm talking about 25 years ago, right? But the same thing, you didn't call Hotmail or AOL or Google and say, can you help reset my password? It sounds silly, right? Well, that's what used to happen in corporations. So if the fundamental belief is, I don't want to self-service my users and anything, I want to have a large IT department, then you sell into the wrong person. So sales is a fundamental driver of reaching not to a yes.
Interesting.
It is to reach a point where it's a not yet, because it begins with a no. You may not buy it today, but they have to buy into the assumptions that you've made about their business.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting viewpoint, PV. Very deep as well. Thank you for this. Moving on to a rapid fire round, which is going to be fun and interesting. Let's see how PV Boccasam would actually answer to this quick, fun things. Okay, all set to start our rapid fire right now. Coffee or tea, PV?
Coffee.
Early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
What's the first thing you would do when you wake up?
Do my breathing exercises.
Brilliant. Which tech gadget can you not live without?
My toothbrush.
Okay. What's your go-to productivity hack?
Podcast for workout.
Okay. Favorite Indian dish?
Just a pure plain rasam.
Okay. That's nice. What's one thing people would be surprised to know about you?
That I make really good tapenades.
Oh,
Like different types of chutneys
yes,
tapenades.
yes.
I could do that. I'm a very good cook.
If you're not in tech, what were you doing?
What would I do?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to be an improv,
Oh.
like a stand-up.
Oh,
improv artist,
That's so interesting. Okay.
and I would like to be, a writer
Oh.
or a playwright.
Wow, brilliant. A startup idea that you wish you would have started or come up with.
I don't have a wish. But, I mean, if I wanted to do it, I would do it.
Great. That's nice of you. One book that changed your perspective.
So they call it the Undoing Project.
The Undoing Project.
Yes.
Okay.
It's about two very famous Nobel laureates and the relationships with each other. And I highly recommend the book. It's written by Michael Lewis, and it's two people. One of them, if he had lived, he would have won the Nobel Prize as well. But his partner won the Nobel Prize in economics. A guy named Daniel Kahneman, who was known for thinking fast, thinking slow. And they're the first people who are non-economists to win a Nobel Prize in economics. So I would highly recommend the book called The Undoing Project.
Yes. One Indian startup that excites you.
I don't have one yet.
Okay. Who is your tech inspirational past or present? Anybody, any icon you see that?
I'd say I'd say I'd go back to, maybe I'm biased, but I do think what Bill Gates did, has revolutionized, what we see and how we think in terms of scale. And he's built an absolutely enduring company. And I do look up to Bill Gates.
Amazing. If you could have a superpower to revolutionize startups, what it would be?
Superpower to revolutionize startups or entrepreneurs? I'd say the ability to communicate an idea in 3 words.
Okay.
Any idea you should be able to communicate in 3 words.
That ends up with our rapid fire round with PV. I would like to conclude a note to PV. In the summary, the agenda enriched with personal reflections, deep insights into entrepreneurship, a forward-thinking perspective on technology, and an in-depth exploration of India's Gen Z's laid the foundation for a dynamic and engaging conversation with our own PV Boccasam. Through this discussion, we have uncovered valuable lessons, thought-provoking perspectives, and actionable insights that will inspire aspiring entrepreneurs and industry leaders. As we reflect on the key takeaways, it is evident that innovation, resilience, and evolving role of young visionaries will continue to shape the future of business and technology. We hope this conversation sparks new ideas and encourages our listeners to embrace change, take bold steps, and drive meaningful impact in their own journeys. PV, thank you. There were many answers, which was definitely expect the unexpected. I was thinking that you would actually put across a very straight view, but it was much deeper and very insightful. And thank you for taking your time off and giving a time for an episode by Pace Wisdom. It's our immense pleasure to have you in this show. Would you like to give a final conclusion message if you have anything as so?
No, thank you for having me here. Good luck to you with Pace Wisdom. You only have one life.
Okay.
Live it to your highest potential.
Thank you, PV. Thanks for your time. Looking forward for more discussions with you. Thank you. You have been a great audience as well. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you.